We're here today with Mohamad Faridi. Mohamad Faridi is a missionary to America. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mohamad.
I'm Iranian and born and raised a devout Muslim. I grew up in a very devout Shi'ite Muslim. They were not only Muslims, they were my family, they were the advocates and the really the teachers of Islam. And growing up in that family, I had to learn Arabic in very early ages. Before even my Farsi was completed, I had to learn Arabic to memorize and read and recite the Qur'an. And by age 5, I've known and recited pretty much the whole Qur'an. And I had to pray 5 times a day and learn the Islamic law as we know him in America, Sharia. I have to keep those laws and make sure that I know how to wash properly and how to walk properly and what to eat and what not to eat and all that. And I was about 6 years old that the war between Iran and Iraq started, and the call for defending Islam started, and we as Shiite Muslim, we were fighting the Iraqis. However, they're Muslims too, but they were the oppressors, and they were the Sunni Muslims.
Sunni Muslims.
That we did not believe that they're Muslims. Sunni didn't believe that Shiites are Muslims, and we didn't believe that they're Muslims. And the call for war came out, and my uncle and 2 of my cousins joined the army, and they were killed for that war. They were killed in Jihad, and they willingly gave their life for Islam. Actually, when my uncle was shot, injured, came home, he was talking to my dad. I never forget that. I was a small kid looking at him. He was on the crutches, linked to the counter, and was talking to my dad. And he was telling him that he was shot, he was injured, and he couldn't go back, and he was ashamed of himself. The song that they were singing those days was "The ladder to paradise is jihad," is this war.
The ladder to paradise is jihad.
Yes, and this is the opportunity he has to climb that ladder to go to paradise. And he was begging that don't take that ladder from us, don't take that war from us. And when he talked to my dad, he said, "This is going to be the last time you'll see me." He opened his watch, gave it to my dad, and he said he had 4 small children at the time, about our age. And when he left, we never see him back. He died in that jihad, and he became a martyr for Islam. And our family didn't grieve. They were proud of him. He became a hero for our family, an idol. And the government turned one of the alleys that we lived on to our family's name in honor of him. And our family all was elevated in the society. We were in the community that we lived, we were saying and take pride in that we shed blood for Islam, what you have done. So that was the environment I grew up, and I wanted to become just like my uncle, to become like him. And I kept growing up and keeping the Islamic law, Sharia, and praying, fasting in the month of Ramadan and all that. And I joined different groups of Shiite Muslims to grow in my Islamic faith, or to be more dedicated. It's not growing in a faith. It's to be a Muslim means to be more submitted. The word Muslim literally means submission. So I wanted to be submitted as much as I could, and so I joined lots of Islamic groups. And in Shiite sect we worship dead, and all the imams that we worship, the successor of Muhammad, we believe is Imam Ali, and we believe it's his son-in-law, and he died. And while he was praying to Allah in the morning, and a man came from the back, hit him with a sword on his head, and he died with a poisonous sword to his head. And we Muslim imitate that. We put a white clothes on, and that is the clothes that is when a Muslim man or a woman dies, they wrap us up in that white garment or that clothes, and then put us in the tomb or the grave. So they put that clothes on, and then they hit their heads with the sword. And I did that. And for the first time, when I did that, I knelt in front of an imam.
How old were you?
I was in the army. I was about 18, 19 years old. And he started reciting the eulogy of that dead imam, the Imam Ali, and I start going with that, and I kneeled in front of him, and he raised the sword and hit my head several times, and the strokes of I still remember that day that those strokes when he hit my skull, I could hear it inside of my head. And when I touched it after he was done, I had chopped hair in the palm of my hand, and blood was running out of the side of my head. And on the top of that, there are a lot of ceremonies and there are a lot of gathering that the Shiite Muslim get together, men, and they darken the rooms, they dim the lights, and the imam recites the eulogy. And we're half naked, and we start beating ourselves on our chests, on the side of our head, and with the chain on our back. And I remember in one incident, in 1 year, in 9 days in a row, every evening I beat myself 2 to 3 hours. That on the 10th day, when I wanted to get out of the bed and go beat myself more, I was so physically ill. And I was so physically weak. While I was breathing, my chest was hurting because I bruised myself on my chest. When I was trying to breathe, my heart would hurt. And I could not go beat myself more on the 10th day. And I was ashamed of myself, because that is the least of us. That is the least is asked of us.
And this was as a young adult. So you grew up in Iran, in a city, in the country?
In the city of Tehran, the biggest city, the capital.
And were there Christians in the city too?
I never know any Christians till age 23. Never knew any Christians.
Okay. So you were in the army?
And then I joined the Revolutionary Army, was trained to become a jihadist. And
what does that mean, jihadist?
Jihadist means a person that wage war against the enemies of Islam.
Yes, okay.
And not only a defensive war, it's an offensive war to export this ideology or this religion to the other nations.
So a part of an army that would take the offensive to make Islam the religion of other countries.
The Revolutionary Army believes that since we had the Islamic Revolution in Iran, we need to export that. And one of their mission statement, one of their things that they stand with is, one of their missions that they stand with is to export this revolution, Islamic revolution, to the other parts of Iran, other parts of the world.
Other parts of the world. Okay.
So I was trained for that.
You were trained to do that.
And I was 18 years old. I joined the army. When I was 19, I joined another movement inside the army called On the Path of Light. And during that movement, we went to the war zones of Iran, between the two countries of Iran and Iraq, when tens of thousands of Iranians died willingly giving their lives for Islam. We went to those areas. I reunited myself with the spirit of martyrdom and jihad, and we slept in graves to fight the fear of death.
They put you in a grave.
That is correct. We did. It was a voluntarily thing, that was sleeping in the graves alone to fight the fear of death, to say, grave, you don't have any power over me. I am not afraid of dying for Islam. And I joined that movement, and then when I finished my Revolutionary Army, My dream as a young adult, as a young man, was to one day that my country, me and my country, gets the chance to war against the enemies of Islam. First Israel, second America, that I can join their army to slay and to be slain, just as like the Qur'an says.
It sounds like a very angry upbringing and very scary upbringing for you.
It is. Islam brings us all in hatred. In the hatred of unbelievers, in the hatred of the enemies of Islam, in the hatred of the Westerners, the secular world, the Christians, since we as Muslims, we believe that Christians, like Americans, and ultimately Jews of Israel, they're poisoning the mind of the Muslims with the pornography of the Hollywood and all that. With that, they're poisoning the mind of our Muslims, our population, the Muslim population we have in the Middle East, and this is that is an abomination to Allah, and we hate that. We hate them. This person sitting here, I hated American and I hated Israel.
So how did you come out of this? This training, this preparation, this army formation to hate and to want to die. What happened?
I was 23 years old and talked to a friend. I was on a path of destruction, and I talked to an old friend of mine. He was a friend of mine. We grew up from age 6. His mom was my dad's colleague in the hospital, and one day we came out, and I had a motorcycle. We wanted to go around and talk. We haven't talked for a while, so we wanted to catch up with things in life. And he told me that he became a Christian.
He became a Christian.
That is correct. And I said, what is the meaning of that? We Muslims believe we are the superior religion. The religion of Allah is the only true religion in the world, and Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. How's that? Why is that? Well, I was really questioned and confused about it. And he explained that how Jesus has changed their lives. And he explained about the miracles and the things that Jesus has done for him. And I was me, he was in him. I knew him growing up. I had a very ugly language, and he wasn't curse or cuss or anything like that. And it was weird. It was like, what's wrong? I thought to myself, what's wrong with this man? What's happened to my friend? And he was telling me that what a miracle Jesus has done in their life. And the way he was talking about God, it was a man-to-man experience. He knew what he was talking. It sounded to me that he knew what he was talking about. He was talking out of his experiences with God, with God. And that day I was talking about what I read from the papers of the Qur'an, or I was echoing what the Imam said in the mosque, or what my parents taught me. I had no relationship with Allah, no matter how much I prayed, no matter how much I fasted, no matter how much I beated myself, cut myself, and read the Quran, recited it, memorized it, never had a relationship with Allah. Allah is a distance God. He is a harsh God. He is out there. You submit yourself to His will, and if you make a mistake, He is there to punish you. But when he was talking to me about Jesus and the God that he found, it was totally different. It was a man-to-man level. It was like he was explaining like a friend. And I was really confused. I said, how did you downgrade from a better religion, or the best religion we have, Islam, to Christianity? Christianity is corrupted, is altered, all the Bible is changed. How did you do that? He said, look, after 2 hours of conversation, I had a weak, I never forget, I had a weak argument for him to present to him. He told me, look, God has so loved you that He has given His only begotten Son for you and for your sin, that He doesn't want you to perish but have everlasting life. I said, Jesus has done that for me? He said, yes. And something hit me that day, on that moment, and I was thinking about the sacrifices we made for Islam. Allah took my cousins, my uncle, to give him paradise. He was taking my life to give me paradise. But the God of Christianity, the God that He knew, was He explained to me, He has already given His Son for me. That I don't need to do that anymore. That I don't need to give my life anymore.
Where did he hear this? How did he become a Christian? He became a Christian in Iran?
That is correct. He became a Christian talking to his aunt.
His aunt?
Yes.
And was she a member of a church?
No, these are all former Muslims. They are all former Muslims.
Okay. How did she become a Christian?
From another former Muslim. Talk to them.
And there was no church as such in Tehran?
No, it's all underground churches.
Underground.
Home churches.
That
Muslims, former Muslims gather together, and 10, 5, 15, 20 of them, they have a service.
In a house church in Tehran, Iran. Wow.
Totally underground, totally illegal.
Wow. So you had this experience, and you'd heard this message of God's love for you. What happened then?
It was the best message I've ever heard in my life. It was so different. And it was powerful. I knew about sacrifice and I knew about blood. And Jesus has offered both of them. He sacrificed His life and He shed His own blood. All the blood that I shed for myself, all the sacrifices I've made for Allah, never helped me. It never helped me. And when He told me that, I said, I want to know about Him. I want to know about Jesus.
So what did you do?
I gave my life and I said, I don't know you, Jesus, but you have done a tremendous job. I will find out if you are the true God. And that day I promised myself I will look into it and see what are they up to.
And how did you look into it?
And a couple of weeks after, nothing happened after that day. He left and we left. He said, I'm going to talk back to you, get back to you later. And a couple of weeks later, he took me to a church. This was an actually building church, and when the Ottoman Empire of Turkey, the Islamic Ottoman Empire, genocide the Armenian Christian people, they fled, the remainings of them, they fled to Iran. That was when Iran is a secular country. They fled and took refuge in the country of Iran. And they were Christian, they have their own small communities, and they had their own churches. To go to a church like that, you need connections. And this family that I know, that they preached the gospel to me, they were Christian for 6 years. So they were kind of trusted to that Armenian church, because the church in Iran, the building churches, they're not allowed to let Muslim in. First, they're afraid that these are going to report them, or they're spies for the government. Second of all, government forbid that. And so he had the connections. He took me to the church for the first time. We got there early in the morning, and pretty much no one was there, because we need to talk to people and say, guys, we have these connections, and we need to. We're fine, kinda. We're clear, and we're real. So I made it to church for the first time. To give you a history about the way that a perspective that a Muslim looks at the Christians, when we touch a Christian or Jew or any other unbelievers, they're unclean. They are filth. And when we touch them, we go and wash ourselves in a ceremonial washing. And for me to go to a church, I'm stepping on in an unclean place.
And your parents knew nothing about this?
Nothing.
And you convinced them somehow that you were a seeker, and that you were really sincere, and you weren't a spy, and you really were looking to know Jesus.
That is correct. And for the first time in my life, I walked to a sanctuary of a church at age 23. And as soon as I walked to the sanctuary of church, something like it. I cannot, this is the best I could find explanation for it. Some loving, peaceful thing came and grabbed a hold.
For a week you were reading the Gospels in your parents' home, and they didn't know you were doing this, but you're reading the Gospel 5 times over, and you're finding this peace and this gentleness and this love of God. And what happens after this?
After that, I attended several more churches, and I kind of came to the conclusion I'm not going to look no more. I'm not going to look into this anymore. I'm not going to examine it. I'm not going to investigate this anymore. I was confident that Jesus is the truth. And when I was at church, and every time I went to church, I felt I made it home. And I wouldn't go to mosque anymore or do the prayers or anything like that. One day I was home, and I was in my room. I turned the lights off and tried to, I was praying. I was praying to Jesus. And I was praying to Jesus, and then my dad came to my room. And he said, he turned the light on and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Dad, I am praying." He said, "Praying to who?" Because the way I was praying, it was foreign to him. Because if you look at any Muslim that they pray, everybody knows they have to go outside or on the top of a trunk of a car in New York or someplace to exhibit that. But what I learned in the Bible says, go to your closet. It's between you and the Lord. It's not between you and the people. Islam, it's between you and the people. Christianity is between you and the Lord. And I was doing that, and he didn't understand what I was doing. He asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm praying to Jesus." He said, "Why to Jesus?" I said, "Dad, Jesus is alive. He can hear me." And he responds to me. And he pointed at the picture of Muhammad that we had in our home. He said, "Why not to Prophet Muhammad?" And I said, "Dad, the Prophet is dead. He cannot hear me." And when I told him that, the color of his eyes changed. And he said, "Astaghfirullah." And he ran to me. And Astaghfirullah means God forgive. Allah forgives. And he ran and grabbed me, pushed me to the wall, and he was about to throw punch and fist and kicks. I pulled myself from him and ran away, and I did not look back. Because I knew he was mad. And I knew him when he was mad. And I left home, and I didn't know what to do. I just called my friend, the person that introduced me to Jesus, and I said, "Man, I told my dad I'm a Christian, and the Prophet is dead, and he's not too happy about the situation." He said, "Okay, I don't know what to say, but come to our place, we pray about it." And that was for the first time I went to an underground church. The whole family was converted. They were Christians, and when I went there, and we got together, they homed me for a while, and they gave me food, and they shared with me, and then we prayed, fasted together, worshiped the Lord, and read our Bibles. And during that time, I got introduced to a chain of former Muslims that they would come to this underground church for like seminars or stuff like that, and they were spread out throughout Iran from different cities, major cities or smaller cities. And so I got to know a lot of those Christians, and I traveled between those cities. I was out for 4 months, and finally my mom talked my dad into bringing me home. And I was the most zealous Muslim our family produced till that time, and I was the front runner of Islam faith. And I was the one actually encouraged my older brothers to get serious about their faith in Islam. And my mom talked to my dad. He said, "You know him. You know his heart. He just made a mistake. He's been brainwashed by the Westerners." That's the common accusation for the Americans or the Jews or the Israelis. And finally, my mom called me, said, "Come home and we'll kind of reconcile and fix this."
This was after 4 months.
Correct.
You were living with this other family.
With other families. With other Christians throughout Iran, and different cities, different times, and finally went home, and they were kind of very carefully came to see what I was about, how serious I was about my new faith, and they kind of questioned me first, and they tried to pursue me. I tried to pursue them. They tried to convert me, I tried to convert them, and the tension rised, and they kind of first were upset, and then they were mad, and then they mocked and laughed, and they thought I'm crazy, and I became ashamed for my family. I was an honor one day for them as a Muslim, and I was a converted. I was an apostate. I was an outsider for them, an unbeliever, and I became ashamed for my family. And whenever we had families or relatives come over, they would send me out. They didn't want me to talk to anybody about Jesus. And the only time I would go home or just go home, it was just to take a shower, maybe to sleep. That's it. We barely ate together at all. And in our family, between me and my brothers and my parents, we did not talk anymore of religion anymore. It was like that was it. And for a Muslim to convert, he's an apostate. He commits shirk, an unforgivable sin. Even if a Muslim repent from that sin, they don't forgive him, and he commits an unforgivable sin, and he ought to be killed according to Sharia, Islamic law. And even if my family would turn me in, the Islamic government would kill me. So they kind of, as much as they hated this about me to become a Christian, they did not want me to be killed for that reason. So they kind of kept me home, but they didn't have any relationship with me. And I was in Iran for 3 years. I was an active Christian. I drove a taxi for that time, and I had my New Testament on the dashboard. Whoever asked about it, I would share Jesus with them. One day, the owner of the taxi agency came to me and said, "Look, the people that you're sharing what you're sharing with, they've already reported you. If the government gets their hand on you, not that they only hurt you, they will hurt your family." And I was afraid. I was afraid for myself, but I was more afraid for them, because they didn't have anything to do with me. My family had nothing to do with my new faith and what I was doing. So I was afraid, and I thought to myself, okay, if not Tehran, the city that I grew up, maybe I go to a different city and start fresh, start new. I thought I'd go to Isfahan or maybe Shiraz or other major cities we have, and I knew lots of Christians there. So I started contacting them, and to see if I could move out there and start my new journey. And many of those Christians, underground Christians that I knew, they've been already arrested, they've been already going to jail, or they were going to courts, and any family member or anybody that answered the phone, they said, "We do not want any more trouble. Just please don't come around here. We have enough troubles." Mm-hmm. And by that time, I kind of after a while, I kind of figured out it's time for me to move on and completely leave the country. Went home, talked to my dad, told him that my life is in danger. I really can't jeopardize you guys. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking about that night, he really thought I'm crazy. Mm-hmm. He really did think I'm crazy, and he said, "I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, after all this change of religion and being apostate now, you're talking even crazy." And that night, I packed my duffel bag. Bought next day in the afternoon, I bought a bus ticket from Tehran to Istanbul, Turkey. Mm-hmm. I left from Istanbul. I left from Tehran to Istanbul, mm-hmm. And after days, bus ride, I got myself to Turkey finally. And since I was going legally through the border, I really thought I'm not going to make it. I thought my name is going to be in the blacklist. They would detain me. But thank God that it wasn't, and I made it through. And when I walked between the free zone of the two countries, I walked through the gate of Iran, exit Iran, walked to in the free zone to get myself to Turkey. I looked back to see if anybody is following me. I was that afraid that it may not happen to me. I may not make it through. Thank God that I made it through, went to Turkey, and made it to Istanbul. So,
and from Istanbul, you come to the United States.
Yes, after I actually in Istanbul, I wanted to find a smuggler to smuggle me to Greece and then to Western Europe. I thought that's the only way. And after a couple weeks of being in Istanbul, I ran out of money. All I had was around $600. When I left my car, my belongings, my bank account, my family, my friends, everything. I left it behind. And I came to Istanbul after a couple of weeks. I ran out of money. Went to work for an Iranian man that I knew in Istanbul, and he told me that he can't give me a job. I said, why not? He said, you're on a touristic visa. I said, but I know I don't have money. I need to work. He said, with the visa you have, you can't. Just go back to Iran. I said, no, I cannot go back to Iran. He said, why not? All these Iranians come here and then they stay a couple of weeks or a month and then they go back, have fun, and they go back. But I said, my situation is different. I'm not here for fun and vacation. And kind of told him a brief story of my life and why I'm in Turkey and why I can't go back. And he said to me, if you're truthful, if you're telling us the truth, there is an office in here that they can help you. I said, what is that office? And he told me that is the United Nations, the Commissioner of Refugees. And I was introduced to that office for the first time, of course, in my life. And then I filed with the United Nations, told them my situation. Took them 3 years. Interrogations after interrogations after interrogations. Unbelievable.
What did you do for 3 years?
I worked in black market in Turkey. Went did construction several times. I was about to be to get killed in different incidences at work. And Turkey is another Muslim country. And my name is Mohamad Amin. And when the Turks knew that I'm a refugee, Mohamad Amin, former Muslim, became a Christian. They really gave me a hard time. And
the church did?
No, the Turks.
The Turks.
The Turks that they worked for.
Turks gave you a hard time.
And I worked in black market, so I had no right to work or no right to complain. So.
You did it for 3 years. Wow.
And after 3 years, finally, United Nations granted me the refugee status. I came to America. I was in Seattle for a month. And then for a year in Los Angeles. There I went to a small church. It was a bilingual church, Farsi English-speaking church. And I met my wife. She's from Indiana. So we got married in Indiana.
She grew up in Indiana? Or
Yes, she's American.
Oh, American. Oh, good.
Yeah. I volunteered for a ministry in California. And my wife worked for the ministry.
And you have a ministry now.
That is correct.
And who are you reaching?
We reach to the churches, and through those churches, we reach to the Muslims. We raise people, train them, that they know how to relate to Muslims and how to preach the gospel to them and what to pray for them. So,
what's your vision for the future of the ministry? Say 10 years from now, what would you, by God's grace, like to see happen with Destination Ministry?
We would like to, my dream is to train many Christians that we have in America. We train them that they know about first Islam, how to relate to Muslim and how to reach out to them and how to love them. Because the population is around approximately about over 7 million in America. We have Muslims. That's about the population of Israel. And these Muslims, many of them had never heard of the gospel. They have been coming through church and different Christians entities to America, but those churches or entities, Christian entities, they never presented the gospel to them. Mm-hmm. But we want to hopefully change that around, and if we bring you here, we want to give you the gospel.
So sharing the gospel with many more Muslims, but doing it through churches, through
Absolutely.
educating churches, so that they understand that there are Muslims who will be open to the gospel once they hear it.
Hear the truth. When you look at my life, I was a hardcore, fanatical Muslim. These are kind of Western names for it, but for a Muslim, it's a believer or a non-believer. I was a believer, a Muslim believer. If nobody would step up and speak the gospel to me, what would happen to me? Mm-hmm. I would die for a wrong cause and for a false god. And we can't change Islam, we can't change the heart of Islam, but we can change the heart of a Muslim. Mm-hmm. We can reach out to Muslims. They're just like me, they're just peoples, and these people are reachable. Mm-hmm. We're not ought to fear them, we're not ought to stereotype them, we ought to reach to them via the gospel through the grace of God. And the truth of the gospel that changed me can change them.
Thank you very much, Mohamad Faridi. It was very nice to hear your story, very exciting, and I'm sure you're going to bless many people in the life, and the new life that the Lord Jesus has
Amen.
given you.
Amen.